People eat with their eyes. I think it is a very important part of what we do as chefs. It's not about just making a dish taste delicious, but it's also making it look interesting and appealing, giving something that is, unique and original to that person eating it.
Because it's the first impression. Even though plating is the last thing you do as the chef, it's the first thing I see as a diner.
Simplicity of a dish is king. As a younger me that wasn't as confident visually, I would say that I probably put more on than I would actually need to.
When you're younger, you just want to show everything that you can do. All your techniques and get as much on the plate as possible, but it's paring it back where the real skill is.
You eventually get round to seeing that path. There has to have meaning on the plate. I don't think it's worth putting something on the plate just for the sake of, if you're using some amazing ingredients, amazing produce, you're not going to make it look like a car crash. That's not going to win you anything.
Welcome to the Food Envy podcast, where we're exploring the visual side of food. Today I'm in central London at Muse with Tom Aikens. Tom, it's really nice to meet you. Thank you for doing this with me today.
Pleasure, no problem.
Just wondering if you could maybe just give me a brief outline of you and your restaurant, maybe talk about your style, visual influences, things like that.
So my name is Tom Aikens. We're in my restaurant here, Muse, which is in the heart of Belgravia. We've been here since pretty much back end of 2019. And we are, in terms of the restaurant, it's a small, intimate dining sort of experience restaurant. Very focused on seasonality, produce. Got some great British suppliers that we use all throughout the year. So I said the menu itself is derived from really great quality produce, seasonally driven, and also we're very much into sort of making sure that dish looks creatively spot on as well.
So in terms of the visual side then, how important do you think visuals are for you personally?
I think with the visuals, as we know, a lot of people eat with their eyes. That's kind of an expression that always goes around the houses. And I think it is a very important part of what we do as chefs. It's not about just making a dish, sort of taste delicious, but it's also, making it look interesting and appealing. And in a sense, giving something that is, unique and original to that person eating it. So you get a bit of a wow factor as well.
That for me is always the most important, the most exciting part of dining, I think. I mean, clearly I'm slightly biased because being a food photographer, that's my jam. But it's that sense of wow when something gets put down in front of you. That always kind of, because it's the first impression. Even though plating is the last thing you do as the chef, it's the first thing I see as a diner. And I think that's always really important in terms of any sort of communication, but also experience. And when you come to a restaurant like this, experience is such a massive part of what you do, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So we take a lot of care and time in having the right amount of detail, because again, it's not, what you don't want to do is overcomplicate things. And I think as a chef, it's one thing as you slowly mature in your life, is that you suddenly realize definitely less is more. Because I think as a younger me that wasn't as confident, I would say, in terms of what I was doing. Visually, I would say that I probably put more on, than I would actually need to. And as we know, the simplicity of a dish, is king, to be honest.
It's so funny doing the episodes of this podcast, how many chefs have said the same thing regarding, when you're younger, you just want to show everything that you can do. All your techniques and get as much on the plate as possible, but it's paring it back where the real skill is and knowing what not to put on almost. How long do you think that kind of took you in your career to have that sort of light bulb moment?
Well, I think it's a stage that we all go through, and I think I think you all will need to go through that just to understand the processes that you go through as a chef. And I think that the realization as well of the fact that it takes a lot more time to put more on. It's more costly, and the fact that it doesn't need it. You eventually get round to seeing that path. But as I said, it's an interesting journey, and I think those that want to be, a head chef will experience that as well. And again, when you're training in the sort of earlier start of your career, you're picking this up from all different types of chefs that you would have worked with, and you'll pick up their styles, you'll pick up their creativity, you'll pick up the way that they cook, the way that they run their kitchen, and you're kind of taking a snippet of each of those to kind of make your own mark, so to speak.
Now clearly you've won stars How important is the visual side of food to that process, do you think? Or is it mainly about the taste? Clearly, you can't just put food on any way you wish, but I mean, do you think it's got a 10%?
No, I mean, I think that, you've got to make something, if you're using some amazing ingredients, amazing produce, you're not going to make it look like a car crash. That's not going to win you anything, to be honest.
Unless you do it on purpose.
Yeah, so I think, they definitely go hand in hand. I think, when I look back at some of the chefs that I worked with, Pierre Kaufman, he was very much about, making sure that a dish tastes absolutely, perfect. I wouldn't say that he was as sort of stringent and fussy as someone like Joe Robuchon. He was kind of more of, gutsy, hearty flavors, more than the sort of, finer, pernickety little details that Robuchon was.
Okay.
And if you're thinking about how to present your food a little better, I've put together something that might just help. It's called the Plate Like a Pro Checklist, a free, downloadable guide that walks you through some of the same design principles chefs like Tom use to make their food look intentional, balanced, and visually striking. And if you want to go that little bit deeper, my book, The Plating Gym, is packed with real-world frameworks and creative exercises to help you develop your own visual style and actually enjoy the process of plating. Both links are in the description.
So when it comes to you designing your own dishes, what's your sort of creative process? Not necessarily the cooking side, but certainly on the visual side. Is it something that you then sort of freestyle when you're experimenting, or have you got a very clear view in your head of how you do it? I've met a lot of chefs that will sketch, or it literally is because you've been doing it for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. You kind of know what you're doing, but because this channel is kind of trying to help people, it's just interesting to know what your process is, and then maybe how you communicate it to your guys or whatever.
So, I mean, in terms of the processes, when we're changing a dish, we'll identify a dish that obviously first off needs to be changed because it's been on too long or it's coming to the end of its seasonality. And then, when we create a dish, we're looking at, the longevity of that dish in terms of the availability of the product, of the produce that we're using. Because we want a dish to stay on for at least, minimum 6 weeks. So first off, we make sure that the ingredient or the main part of that dish is available. Then after that, we'll think of kind of the garnish of it. So it depends on where it is in the menu, because we have some protein, we have, some purely vegetable dishes as well. And then, once we kind of decide on what we're doing and the main element of that, we'll then to start to build it, to construct it. And again, that whole process, can take a number of times. Definitely doesn't happen like, one hit wonder, that's for sure. Not anymore.
I think most people would be quite pleased to hear that.
No,
things don't just spring out of nowhere.
It's stages.
It's an evolution.
It's stages. It really is. In terms of, because at the end of the day, it's not just about, you've got the main ingredient, then you've got some garnish, you've got sauce, whatever, salad leaves, whatever it is. But then it's also the vessel, what the vessel is, what the plate is, what the what the cutlery is, etc., etc. So it goes further than just creation of the dish, because again, a dish can look so very, very different. If it's on stone or plate or glass, what shape is it, what color is it, all of these other things that you need to consider as well.
It's a myriad of decision making, isn't there, really? And is that something that you do with the team, or is that something that is mainly driven by you? Or
in terms of the plateware, that's down to me. I kind of definitely do that. But then sort of coming up with actual dishes, that's between me and my head chef Aaron that do that. And then we decide in terms of when we're going to make the changes. Also, with the sommelier, with the restaurant manager, so we all know, what wine's going to be served, what cutlery, what crockery do we need, training into the dish, making sure all the staff know exactly how it's prepared, what's in it. Then you have all the usual, I wouldn't say interesting stuff, but the boring stuff of, allergies and allergens and all of that needs to be trained and taught, and various different tastings. So, it takes it does take a while to get, to get a dish on.
Okay. So hypothetically, let's say you're creating a new dish.
Yeah.
You're just worrying, you've got a white plate, fairly bog standard. Where do you go to in your mind in terms of how you would then think about plating the dish for the first time effectively? Like, do you just go immediately to the centre of the plate? Do you think, I'm going to go for an isolated layout, so I know I'm going to have this, 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 and this? Or is it going to be condensed? Or is it just you see how the ingredients
I just see how it is, in terms of the ingredients that we're using, because sometimes, there can maybe just be, 3-4 different things going on. Maybe there may be, more, so it just depends really. But, the one thing that I really kind of steer away from is really sort of millimeter precision in terms of something that needs to be there all the time in terms of 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 or 5 or 3 or whatever, that it needs to be exactly precise. There is an occasional point of that we do have, but generally I try to be a little bit more free flow and natural more than anything.
Is that more process driven because it's just harder to do in service as opposed to visually?
No,
or you just don't like the aesthetic of it?
Just visually. No? I just think it's more natural to have something that, and it's more, I think, aesthetically pleasing. I think there is, as I said, there is a time and a place for millimeter precision in terms of where something needs to be placed, because that also looks exceptionally sharp and beautiful and can do. But then, also some dishes just look very natural and look better when it's just put on sporadically as well.
So in your kitchen, what's sort of your go-to plating tools? Are you like tweezers? Are you molds? All that kind of stuff? Or are you fairly like just do all of it?
We basically we'll use a mixture of spoons and tweezers, molds as well. Yeah, so it's again depends on the type of dish that we're doing, but definitely tweezers are used because we're up in an open kitchen, so we're definitely going to be using our fingers, so to speak. So everything is intricately placed and methodically done.
Yeah.
So in a way of us making sure that from a food safety standard as well, it's not touching the product too much either.
Okay. So what about you personally then? Where do you draw your inspiration from for these sorts of things? Are you a fan? I mean, you've clearly got some lovely art in your restaurant and stuff. Is that something that you personally enjoy? Do you get influences from art, photography, any other areas that might kind of just via osmosis end up into your food, do you think? Or
well, I basically like in terms of the plateware and the china, I try and stay clear of what anyone else is doing. So an effect of having plateware, chinaware that is different from from other restaurants. So try and have something that is is visually appealing. I think in terms of design of a plate is very important.
Is that bespoke stuff as well? So nobody has it?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of bespoke stuff. We have a lot of stuff that's handmade. So on that end, it's very it's very expensive. It's one of the things that you have to put up with, that there are going to be breakages and things do get broken, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
But when you're paying for a plate that's anywhere from 50 to 90 pounds, then it's
That's sobering, isn't it?
It's expensive.
Yeah.
So yes, as I said, so we try and do something that is totally original in terms of the plateware that we use.
Yep.
We have lots of different plates that are different designs in terms of shape and style.
You get quite a lot of colours in there as well.
No, try not to white, because
white.
There are definitely colours that don't work. Kind of blues.
It's dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely blue doesn't work. There are elements of other bright colours as well, like reds and greens and yellows and stuff. So
if you were trying to design, say, like a monochromatic dish, because I always think that's such a powerful yet really hard thing to do. Would you then consider it potentially if it ties in with if you're doing all beetroot and all something like that?
Yeah, I mean it is difficult, but then again a lot of food stands out really well on a plain white plate as well. So
contrast is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, so it's tough, but I would say when I look at my plate collection, probably 80% are white. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you changing that? How often are you changing the plates and things? Is that
I buy something every year. I buy something every year, yeah, for sure.
Got a bit of a habit.
Yeah, I do.
I met a guy for one of these podcasts down in Poole who'd just opened his restaurant, and he said the best day of his life was being able to go and pick his own stuff from wherever, I think it was Surrey Ceramics or something like that, and he just said he was like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
You get a bit of a habit.
It's a chef's dream of endless supply of expensive plates.
Yeah. So we talked earlier about how you have put less on the plate. Is there anything else that has changed in your style, do you think? I mean, clearly there are fashionable things like swooshes and micro herbs and all that kind of stuff. I was just wondering if there's anything that, you've developed over time that you think is kind of your sort of style. Is there anything?
Well, I mean, I think the procedures of what we do in terms of a menu, I think we've got a good balance on the menu in terms of the offering of what it is, going through, we do 2 rounds of snacks, then we have 2 sort of, vegetable courses, then we have, we also have a bread course in there. We do one special course, if people want to have it, which is lobster, so shellfish. Then we have, fish and main. Then we have pre-dessert, dessert, and petit four. So, it's substantial enough. But again, the priority is to make sure that the guest doesn't feel overwhelmed by the end, that they're not feeling like, like a stuffed hippopotamus or something, they're like, can't eat anymore. There's nothing worse, I think, than if you're paying for an expensive meal or you're going out somewhere really nice, and by the end of it you're just totally stuffed and full, and it's just a unpleasant feeling. So in terms of having the right balance of ingredients and produce, richness, sourness, everything, all of that does kind of, play with your mind and your tummy. Again, you want to feel here, very happy, content, and you've had an amazing time.
Of course. And do you think the visual side of food, because of the rise of things like social media, and I don't just mean the Facebooks and the Instagrams and stuff, but just how visual we all are, because we consume a huge amount of imagery, that more chefs are taking the visual side more importantly, because it is a communication tool, not just when they come to the restaurant, but because, I assume you probably don't mind if diners are taking snaps of your food, but you want to make sure it looks as good as it can do effectively. So is that something you've seen change over the last 15, 20 years?
I think, I
years
mean,
even?
due to the camera and social media, for sure. I think in the way that food photography is an important part, of a chef's life now, in terms of portraying them, their restaurant, their creative mind of what they're thinking. It gives people a real insight into them as a person, their sort of creative style. And again, there's a lot more thought and detail that goes into food photography, into making something look amazing. Because, when you've got, something plated, regardless of what is on the plate, it can look 10 times better or 10 times worse, given the skill of the photographer, or given, natural light, or if it's, studio light or whatever. So there's a lot of other things, to take into consideration as well when you're doing the photography as well.
Do you think sort of British food has a style at this sort of level? Do you think it has, it's not necessarily Nordic, but it's not far off, possibly. Do you think there is a style?
With British food, again, when you try and pigeonhole or categorize some style, I think it's very hard, because every chef, of course, has their own unique style in terms of the way that they visualize, prepare, cook, run their kitchen. Everyone is totally different, and I don't think, we can all be put in the same hole of modern British whatever, because that's kind of what it all does get pigeonholed in. But if you want to break it down, much further, it's like an onion. You peel away and peel away and peel away, and you'll suddenly have a pinpoint of what your food is. So I think it's difficult to give a accurate label.
Certainly on a visual side, I imagine.
No.
Okay. Are there any sort of plating styles that you're either particularly enjoying at the moment, or any ones you're particularly pleased to see the back of?
I'm never pleased to see the back of any dish. I think it's always kind of almost sad to see a dish go, because you've prepared it from scratch, from nothing. You've had the idea, you've had the processes of creating it and making it, deciding what to do with it, how it's presented. So eventually when it goes, it's kind of, a little bit of a sad time,
So it's more, not necessarily about dishes you're making here, but in terms of styles of things that you might see on plates. Like, for example, swooshes, or the possibly overuse of micro herbs just to add colour, because somebody hasn't necessarily thought it through effectively. So if there's anything that you think, I'm looking forward to not seeing that on.
Yeah, and I think in terms of things that, come into, I would dare say they use the word fashion or trend or whatever, I would say that I'm not one to follow that. To be honest, I just do my own thing, as you know, as do most chefs. I think there's always a trend that comes and goes, and smears, or or little little quenelles, or if it's dots, or there's always something that a lot of people are following suit, and it works for a bit, and then something else will come along. But I think it has there has to have meaning on the plate. I don't think it's worth putting something on the plate just for the sake of it's everywhere else.
I think that's one of the things, again, social media has a lot to answer for, is the proliferation and speed that trends go around. When somebody does, if you're at the start of that trend, that's great, right? Because that's probably you doing it. But when everybody jumps on it, and it's just, you see more and more, or when I do speak to more and more people, they think, things like micro-herbs and all that kind of stuff is, if there's a place for it, great, but sometimes it's, people are just doing it because they haven't really thought through what they're doing effectively. So it's just interesting to find out. Did you study food, or did you just kind of end up in the kitchen? Did you go to like a college? Or
I went to college, yeah.
You went to a college. Now, I'm guessing that was a little while ago, but from the guys that you have coming in that have maybe been to college, because I'm just interested, do they do anything on plating in colleges, or is it more when you actually get a job that you then find out a little bit more about techniques and how to do it?
I would probably say that the majority of stuff that you learn in college is definitely nothing to do with plating.
Okay.
No, I think that in terms of your own personal journey on that, which it is personal because you'll have your own style, and that comes through quite a few years of training and just seeing what is out there, and eventually you will find the way that you make it happen. And again, that will change over the course of your career. If I can look back, which I do sometimes anyway, in terms of some of the food that I do and have done, some of it goes, ugh, should I really do that? And some like, wow, it's pretty impressive. So it depends. I
think that's with any creative endeavour though, because I look at my photography portfolio from 10 years ago, and it's like, I cannot believe I did that. But with plating and presentation, it does surprise me that there's certainly even more nowadays that there isn't more of that, because there is fundamental to any design, be it in photography, be it in fashion, be it in things. There's just good practice of techniques that you can use to easily make it look better. And I just find it very surprising that there is nothing that is taught just to give you the base, or give somebody new the basics of why negative space is a good idea, why it's a good idea to have balance on the plate, symmetry or asymmetry, or any of this kind of stuff. Just find it quite surprising that there's not been anything, because it's, for me, again, I'm biased, but it's such a visual thing.
Yeah, I don't, at the end of the day, as well, I think you've either got it or you haven't as well. Of course you can be taught it creatively in terms of artistry and drawing and everything, but I think connecting, the hands and the mind and the visual is unique. And as I said, if you give 10 people, 2 bits of asparagus and something else, and get them to say, okay, create something with asparagus, you're going to get 10 different dishes. For sure, which is exciting and interesting and fun to see that happen, because again, it's the dynamics of individuals that creatively make something, totally different from your neighbor. So that's exciting, I think it's always fun to see how people think the process is. Like as I said, it's like cooking competitions, for instance. They're exciting and interesting because pretty much everyone is given the same thing, yet they've got to do something very different, and that's when you are then using your years of skill and tutoring to a degree of who you've worked with, where that comes from.
Yeah, you've partaked from both sides in that, have you? You've done the cooking competitions as an entrant, but also as a judge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've done that. Yeah.
Better being on the judge side.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, with Great British Menu, I've done that several times. So, and then when I was much younger, when I was doing quite a lot of salon, culinary kind of things. But yeah, I think it's nice to do those types of things because again, it kind of helps you sort of really strive for perfection, because you're not actually. Some of them you are cooking for people, and some of them you're doing, static stuff. So in a way, it does give you a little bit more choice on how you can be creatively as well.
Yeah, it's funny thinking about Great British Menu, because I cannot think of a certainly something on the TV that is so heavily focused on the visual side of it. You know, when they're bringing it to the past and they've gone through all the different plates, and clearly I assume they have a budget to go to somebody and try and knit that story together in the visual.
Yeah.
It's really powerful.
It is, but I think you know, the way that you know, Great British Menu has, you know, has significantly progressed. I think that in a way, you know, if you take like a football team, for instance, you know, you have Division 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, yeah? You have the big players, the big teams that can afford to spend, you know, 60 million, and then you have those that can't, you know? And I think to a point, I think with GBM, they should like give a you know, a top line of the maximum that can be spent for everyone and make that a fair price.
Because I kind of assumed that's what it was.
No.
Oh, is it not?
No.
Oh,
no.
okay.
No.
So you can add to a budget or something, can you? If
you could go, you know, you can go nuts. You can spend what you like, you know. But I think, you know, it's you know, because of the, you know, the parameters of the competition. You got, you know, chefs coming from hotels. You got chefs coming from independents. And obviously hotels, they have bigger budgets. So I think in terms of the independents, they definitely can't afford to spend, you know, thousands, which it costs, you know. I mean, it does cost a lot of money, you know, once you start having everything bespoke made, which you do in a way need to, because it then illustrates or helps to illustrate your story, your food, everything else that's connected to the brief. So in a way, you know, having something bespoke made is important for you to progress into the competition. And therefore, if you are going to do that, it's going to be expensive. And if you don't do that, then you may not progress. So, you know.
Yeah, it's a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that visual, that story, when they bring it up to the past and tell it, that's kind of that's the money, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Goodness me. Okay, not including your food. What's the most beautiful dish do you think you've ever eaten?
I think in terms of you know, a beautiful dish that I've eaten doesn't always have to be like visually wow, oh my god, because again, you know, simplicity, pure is the best. I mean, it really is. Like, you know, if you have, even if it's a standalone ingredient of one thing, you know, it's like, if it's done right, you know, there are things I can say, you know, on my, you know, in my memory of what I've had and what I have, I'm not talking about my food, but you know, others that I've eaten or have seen, you know, you just like inspired, because, you know, to think of that dish and just to be able to, you know, for a second just put yourself in their shoes of when they actually first did it is it's groundbreaking. Sometimes, yeah, it's groundbreaking. I mean, one of the ones when I was working with Gilles Robuchon in Paris, so this was in 92, 93, or 93, was his truffle tart.
Yeah.
So there's a truffle tart, yay big, and it had probably about, I don't know, 25 discs of probably about 50p bigger of truffle on there. Fucking exceptional. I mean, exceptional. Like, just very clean, very simple, but just decadent and just beautiful. You know, to look at and just then obviously to consume.
So that gave you that wow when it.
Yeah, and then another one was with Michel Guérard, another French chef who's sadly, you know, passed away now. He did this dish of a baked potato with truffle. He grew a lot of his own vegetables. It was a baked potato, again like this, taken out obviously all the potato, made it into a very light potato soup, and basically put it back with, you know, a ton of Perigord truffle, and it was just, again, just fucking amazing. Because you got potato, which is earthy, truffle, which is earthy. It just worked. It was just beautiful. It was just like, whoa, amazing. And I think, you know, other chefs as well that are, you know, creatively genius is Ferran Adrià and his brother Alberto. You know, two iconic chefs, two just, you know, geniuses, I think, in terms of creativity, in terms of their own unique style and the boundaries of impossibilities that they pushed and did consistently push again and again and again, in terms of conjuring up, you know, these just beautiful, unique dishes, you know. And I'm talking of, first off, El Bulli, and, you know, I started going there in 96, you know, just before it became, you know, molecular gastronomy and everything. And it was just, you could see a turning point in, you know, in what he was striving for, where his mind, his genius mind was going, because it was just, you know, nothing ever had been done of what he was doing, and creatively, that man was just, you know, a genius in terms of, you know, how he conceptualized dishes. You know, was just, yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So this can include your food. What's the hardest dish you've ever had to plate?
Well, the hardest dish of my food that I would ever have to plate, I'll probably have to ask, you know, chefs that have worked with me before. It's probably the best thing, because I would say then, you know, from moments of, you know, when I was at Pied à Terre to when I was at Tom Aikens, you know, that part of my career, you know, you're still growing, you're still learning, you're still maturing. And I'm a different, you know, I'm a different person, different man, different chef now than I was, you know, 10 years ago, for sure. So, you know, I would say I was very, you know, when I was at Tom Aikens, you know, I was very much focused on, you know, on very, very finite little details of everything, and some dishes had a lot of work into them in terms of pan work, in terms of things coming up to the pass, in terms of a certain time. Tom Sellers always goes on to me about a rabbit dish that I had on. It was literally like 15 different things of
Really?
parsley, you know, vermicelli and little baby carrots, and, you know, lots of intricate bits of rabbit and everything. Yeah. So, you know, but again, you know, it just, as I said, you go through these troughs of different creativity styles, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's growth in any sort of artistry, isn't it, really? You know, so that's great. And then just finally, really, could you tell us a little bit about the dish that you're going to plate for us today?
Yeah, so the dish we're going to do is a ricotta dish. So it's called Just Down the Road. So this dish is inspired from where I used to live in Norfolk, where I used to have a dairy farm just literally 10 minutes from where I used to live, hence why we call it Just Down the Road. So it's Old Hall Farm. We use their milk and cream to create the ricotta dish, but the ricotta is the one part of the dish that stays the same. The rest of it, the garnishes, we change seasonally, so it's always, you know, seasonally changed, seasonally inspired, and that is the dish that we're creating today. So at the minute, we've got some beautiful different beans in season. So we've got Bolotti beans, and then some Piatoni beans, yellow, green, runner beans. And then you've got some beautiful peaches as well. So we've got a peach gazpacho. And then you've got some figs as well on there. So it's a fig leaf vinaigrette made with marinated fig leaf oil and vinegar, and then a fig chutney as well.
Amazing. And does the sort of the plating kind of stay relatively similar, and then you just change the ingredients, or do you completely reinvent how it's plated?
No, the ricotta is done the same. It's always piped. It's always done in a little kind of diamond shape. Yeah, but everything else changes.
Okay, depending on what it is, and I guess how it all works with the dish.
Yeah.
Because I saw one, I think, online where you're doing it with beetroots.
Yeah.
Which I thought would look really stunning, because it had lots of different angles coming out of it and things like that. So it had a lot of tension, and it was very asymmetric, which I think is a very interesting way to play. Because I think a lot of the time symmetry is a nice simple go-to, but I think if you can add more asymmetry to something, it just gives the visually something more interesting to look at.
Yes,
so
it is. Yeah.
It's just one of those things. It's interesting to see how you constantly keep a established dish new and fresh and things like that.
Yeah.
So I guess the ingredients is what drives it, though.
It is, yeah, totally. It's the ingredients, and then that will also then creatively make you think of how it can be presented as well. Yeah.
Brilliant, Tom. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank
No
you,
problem.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.